Imagine working your tail off for 3 solid years in the dangerous asteroid mines, saving every single credit, just for a shot at your dream. That was Marcus Kane's reality. At 22, he was finally stepping onto the shuttle to the elite space academy, but he felt more like an old man than a freshman. And after all that hard work, the first thing the academy does is deny his request for a single room. What would you do in his shoes? Let me know in the comments. As the transport docked with station Helix 9, his stomach did a flip-flop. This massive, glittering cylinder in space was his new home, and it was the most intimidating thing he'd ever seen. "Welcome to the Academy," a crackly voice announced. "Mind the gravity shift." Marcus grabbed his beat-up duffel bag, a relic from his mining days that looked totally out of place against the shuttle's sleek interior. When the airlock hissed open, he walked into pure, organized chaos. The arrival bay was a whirlwind of humans, cyborgs, and aliens, all moving with a purpose he couldn't yet understand. His translator implant was working overtime just to keep up with the dozens of languages swirling around him. A 3-armed administrator yelled, "Dorm assignment, Sector 7!" And Marcus just followed the glowing lines on the floor, his heavy magnetic boots clanking with every nervous step. The dorms were quieter, a long, curved hallway of identical doors. His assignment pad read 7G42. The door slid open, and he let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The room was actually pretty big for a space station. 2 beds, a desk area, and a huge window with a jaw-dropping view of a nebula. But his relief was short-lived. The other bed was already taken. Women's clothes were in the closet, and weird crystal trinkets were lined up on a shelf. So much for that single-room request. Space was always a hot commodity, but he couldn't help feeling a little cheated. He was just pulling out his engineering textbooks when the bathroom door slid open, releasing a cloud of steam that smelled like lavender. A woman stepped out, and Marcus's brain just stopped. She was shaped like a human, but that's where the similarity ended. Her skin gave off a soft, bioluminescent light, shifting from a pale blue to a gentle silver. Long, damp white hair tumbled over her shoulders. She was wearing nothing but a towel, and it looked like it was barely hanging on. "Oh," she said, her voice a melody that made his fillings hum. "You must be my roommate." "I'm Lyra," she added. Marcus snapped back to reality, his face instantly turning red as he spun around. "I'm so sorry. They didn't tell me. I didn't know I'd be sharing with a girl." She let out a laugh that sounded like tiny bells. "The Academy gave up on separating by gender ages ago. We have too many species with too many different ways of doing things. It just got too complicated." "Right, of course," Marcus mumbled, fumbling with his unpackaging. He was trying desperately not to think about the stunningly beautiful, glowing alien woman who clearly didn't share his human hang-ups. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Marcus," she repeated, and the way she said his name made it sound like something special. "I like it. Very earthly." The next few days were a masterclass in awkwardness for Marcus. Lyra, a xenobiology major, had zero concept of personal space as he knew it. She'd change her clothes with the door wide open or wander around in what he could only describe as alien lingerie, completely baffled by his constant blushing. "Your species has such strange rules about the body," she commented one night, stretched out on her bed. "On my world, what we wear, or don't wear, is just another way of talking." Marcus glued his eyes to his homework. "Well, on my world, we usually prefer to have our conversations fully clothed." Her tinkling laugh echoed in the room again. "How inefficient. How do you show you're interested in someone? Or what your social standing is?" We use words," Marcus said, "and facial expressions and body language. With our clothes on." "I suppose I should try to follow your customs," she said with a shimmering stretch. "When in Rome, right?" "I would really appreciate that," Marcus muttered, trying to focus on a complex equation while his roommate was literally glowing in his peripheral vision. The real trouble kicked off in their second week. The station's fancy water recycling system broke down in their sector. That meant the sonic showers were out, and they had to use emergency water rations and old-fashioned collapsible tubs. Marcus waited until Lyra was gone for her evening lab before he dragged the tub out. It was ridiculously small for his 6-foot frame, but the thought of soaking in actual, real water after days of feeling like he'd been cleaned with a sandblaster was too good to pass up. He carefully filled the tub, added the cleaning solution, and sank in with a deep sigh of relief. For a glorious few minutes, he forgot all his stress, the pressure of his classes, his weird living situation, everything. Then, the door chimed. His eyes shot open. Lyra wasn't supposed to be back for at least another hour. He heard the door slide open and her melodic voice call out, "Marcus, I forgot my lab samples!" It all happened in a blur. He tried to stand up, water splashed everywhere, his foot slipped on the wet floor, and he stumbled right out of the tub. And that's when Lyra walked around the corner. For a split second, the world stopped. There Marcus stood, dripping wet and completely exposed, frozen like an animal caught in the headlights. Lyra's eyes went wide, but her expression wasn't shocked or embarrassed. It was curious. Her gaze traveled from his face, slowly down his entire body, and lingered on certain spots that made his skin feel like it was on fire. Then she did something that made his brain reboot entirely. She licked her lips. It wasn't a quick little flick of the tongue. It was slow and deliberate, her purple-tinted tongue gliding over her bottom lip as her eyes stayed locked on him. The glow of her skin brightened, pulsing in a steady rhythm like a cosmic heartbeat. "Fascinating," she whispered, tilting her head. "Your species' anatomy is quite remarkable when fully displayed. The muscle structure, the flush of blood to the skin, it's very educational." Marcus's brain finally came back online. He snatched the ridiculously tiny towel and wrapped it around his waist, his hands shaking. "Lyra, you can't just... You're supposed to look away!" "Why?" she asked, taking a step closer. He backed up until his back hit the cold wall. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. Actually, by the standards of most species I've studied, you're very well proportioned. That scar on your shoulder from the mining accident? It gives you character." "That's not the point," his voice squeaked. "There are rules. Privacy." "Ah," she nodded, though her eyes still had a hungry look in them. "Human modesty. I've read about it. Your emotional response is fascinating. Embarrassment mixed with something else. Your pupils are dilated," she continued, stepping even closer. "Your heart rate is up. Those are classic signs of arousal, despite your social conditioning." This isn't," Marcus stammered, clutching the tiny towel for dear life. "Could you please just turn around so I can get dressed?" "If you insist," she said, but she took one last, long look before she did. "Although in my culture, when someone reveals themselves so openly, it's considered an invitation." When he was finally dressed, he said through gritted teeth, "Well, this was not an invitation. It was an accident. A very embarrassing accident we will never, ever speak of again." "If that is what you wish," she said, turning back around with a playful smile. As she grabbed her samples and headed for the door, she paused and glanced back at him, her skin pulsing with that strange, rhythmic light. "You should know," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that on my world, what just happened? The accidental reveal, the mutual observation, your physiological response, it would be considered the start of a courtship." And with that, she left a completely stunned Marcus standing alone in his dorm room. "We are not a thing," Marcus insisted, his voice tight. "Oh, of course not," Lyra replied, her tone dripping with amusement. "We're just roommates who've now seen each other mostly naked. Roommates whose biosignatures are, according to my sensors, becoming ridiculously compatible. Totally platonic. She vanished out the door before he could even form a protest, the panel sliding shut with a soft hiss. Marcus collapsed onto his bed, burying his face in his hands. He'd moved across the galaxy to study engineering, to build a new life for himself. He definitely hadn't signed up for whatever this was. This constant, simmering tension, this hyper-awareness of her that zapped his focus and made his skin tingle. But as he lay there, trying to will his heart rate back to normal, he couldn't forget the look on her face when she saw him. The subtle shift in her alien features, the sheer intensity in her eyes, the slow, deliberate way she had reached for her own towel. Against all logic, a rebellious corner of his mind couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if he hadn't been so quick to cover up. The station's water reclamation system was back online the next day, but the real damage was already done. The careful, polite boundaries Marcus had worked so hard to build had been completely vaporized. Lyra seemed to take the whole incident as a green light to be even more relaxed in their shared space, frequently forgetting about trivial things like closing doors. "I'm trying to respect your human traditions," she explained one morning, standing in their small kitchen, wearing nothing but a few strategically placed beams of light. "But it is difficult when they go against my nature. On my world, we build closeness through total openness." Marcus stared hard into his coffee. Real, earth-grown coffee that cost him a small fortune. "Your world sounds very different." It was, she said, and the note of sadness in her voice was so profound, it made him look up. For a split second, her usual playful confidence was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. "Before I was forced to leave." "Why'd you have to leave?" he asked, instantly regretting how nosy it sounded. The light from her skin dimmed a little. "That's a conversation for another time, I think. Maybe when we know each other a little better." The playful smirk returned, deflecting. "Although after yesterday, I'd say we're getting there pretty fast, wouldn't you?" Their dynamic shifted into a new rhythm after that, a constant dance of awareness hidden behind jokes, and a mutual curiosity they called cultural exchange. Marcus found himself genuinely excited for their study sessions, just to watch her curl up with her xenobiology texts, her skin painting soft, shifting patterns on the walls. She would ask him about human ways, and he would try to explain concepts that never seemed odd until he saw them through her eyes. "So humans really choose their mates based on emotional signals instead of biological efficiency?" she asked one night, tilting her head in that way that meant she was truly stumped. "Yeah, pretty much. We call it falling in love." "Inefficient," she decided, "but charming. My people use a mix of genetic screening, pheromonal analysis, and social status. It's far more practical." "Doesn't sound very romantic," Marcus said with a dry smile. "Romance is a human invention," she shot back. "We have passion, desire, of course. But this whole idea of picking a partner based on feelings alone, it's beautifully chaotic. Is that why you're studying alien biology? To make sense of all the other chaotic species out there?" She went quiet for a long moment, tracing the glowing lines on her textbook. "Partly," she admitted. "But it's mostly because understanding others helps me understand where I fit. When you're caught between two worlds, and you don't really belong to either, you have to carve out your own space." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to him, and Marcus felt a sudden need to share something too. "I get that. Growing up in the asteroid mining colonies, I never fit in. I was too nerdy for the other miners, but too rough around the edges for the elite academy kids. This place was supposed to be a fresh start for me." "And is it?" she asked softly. He looked at her, really looked at her. Past the glowing skin and the alien eyes, and the massive cultural gap between them. He realized he'd felt more like himself in these last few weeks than he had in years. "Yeah," he breathed. "I think it is." Her smile was different this time, softer, without any of her usual teasing. "Good. Fresh starts are meant to be embraced, even if they start with you accidentally flashing your roommate. You are never, ever going to let that go, are you? Never, she chirped. In fact, my culture would say you now owe me a reciprocal viewing to restore cosmic balance. Marcus chucked a pillow at her, and she dodged it with an impossible fluid grace, her laughter echoing like wind chimes. As they settled back into their work, he couldn't ignore how the empty space between them felt like it was shrinking, day by day. How her casual touches now lingered for a heartbeat too long, and how his awareness of her had morphed from panicked discomfort into something much, much more dangerous. Through their viewport, the great nebula churned in silent, magnificent chaos, completely unaware of the tiny dramas unfolding inside the station. Marcus had a sinking feeling that his carefully planned life was about to become just as chaotic as those swirling clouds of gas and dust. And the scariest part? He didn't seem to mind at all. The water crisis was over. But some images, once burned into your brain, couldn't be erased, and some lines, once crossed, could never be redrawn. As Lyra herself would say, it was all turning out to be very educational. The weeks after what Marcus now called the towel incident were a dizzying mix of classes, lab projects, and these ridiculously complicated roommate negotiations. Living with Lyra was like tiptoeing through a minefield of cultural misunderstandings and simmering chemistry. "Marcus, can you explain this human ritual of knocking?" she asked one evening, simply appearing in their room as he was pulling on a clean shirt. "I've researched it, but its application appears to be random." Marcus quickly tugged his shirt the rest of the way down. "It's not random. You knock before you enter a room in case someone's in a state of privacy. But this is our shared quarters. It is, by definition, not private." She tilted her head, watching him with those glowing eyes that always seemed to see right through him. "Besides," she added, "I have already viewed you with significantly fewer clothes on. Why is this a concern now?" "Because," Marcus fumbled for an explanation that would make sense to her, "because consent matters. Just because something happens by accident doesn't make it an open invitation." "Ah," she nodded, her skin pulsing with a soft blue-white light he now recognized as her processing pattern. "So humans require ongoing permission for visual access. Fascinating. My species assumes that once a level of intimacy is reached, it is continuous unless formally revoked. Well, consider me formally asking for knocking. Please." "Very well," she smiled, a smile that clearly meant she was indulging his strange customs. "I will endeavor to adopt your quaint traditions, although I must note that your heart rate still spikes whenever I enter unannounced, and my sensors suggest it's not entirely from anxiety." Marcus could feel his face flush. "You can read my heart rate?" "Among other things," she said, gliding over to her desk in the form-fitting academy uniform that didn't leave much to the imagination. "Pheromone output, skin temperature, pupillary response. Your species broadcasts its emotional state quite loudly, if one knows the language." "That's a complete invasion of privacy." "It's biology," she corrected him smoothly. "No more invasive than you noticing my skin glows brighter when I'm happy or dims when I'm sad. We all communicate in ways that go far beyond words." She wasn't wrong. Not that Marcus was going to admit it. In the past few weeks, he'd become an expert at reading her tells, the way her bioluminescence would shift with her moods, how her strange, feathery hair seemed to float just a little more when she was excited. The specific angle she'd tilt her head right before she said something that would flip his entire world upside down. Their study nights had become the highlight of his day. Tonight, she was lounging on her bed, a holographic star chart of complex genetic lines floating above her, while he tried to focus on engineering blueprints. "Your species has remarkably flexible DNA," she said out of nowhere. "Are you aware that humans have one of the galaxy's highest rates of successful interspecies procreation?" Marcus almost spit out his expensive coffee. "That's not exactly on the recruitment brochures." "Why not? It is a great strength. Only about 30% of known species can produce viable offspring with another. Humans are compatible with almost 60%. She rolled onto her stomach, resting her chin in her hands. From an evolutionary perspective, that is a massive advantage. I'll be sure to mention that in my dating profile, Marcus grumbled. Human male, compatible with over half the galaxy. Lyra's laugh was that beautiful, chiming sound that always did a number on his chest. You say it as a joke, but on many worlds, that would make you an extremely eligible bachelor. Genetic diversity is a prized commodity. And on your world? Her entire demeanor changed, the playful light in her eyes replaced by something guarded. On my world, bloodlines are everything. Ancient families, genealogies tracked for centuries, strategic pairings to consolidate power and desirable traits. She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. It is a large part of why I am here, and not there. Marcus pushed his work aside, sensing this was one of those rare moments of real honesty. You said you had to leave. Was it because of one of those pairings? Something like that, she said, her skin fading to a soft, pearly gray. I was promised to an individual of high political rank, a union that would have stopped a brewing conflict between two powerful houses. But you didn't want to go through with it. What I wanted was irrelevant. The bitterness in her tone was sharp enough to cut. On my world, individual desires are secondary to collective benefit. But I had this radical idea that I should have some say in who I spend my life with. So you ran away to the academy. Fled is more accurate. She stood, moving to the viewport to stare out at the stars. Abandoned my family, my responsibilities, my entire world, all for the selfish desire to choose my own path. What would you do if your entire future was decided for you? Stick around to find out if one person can truly defy an empire. Marcus joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. That's not selfish. That's brave. Is it? Her reflection in the transparisteel looked haunted. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. The political situation back home is delicate. My absence has consequences. You can't live your life for other people's political games, Marcus said firmly. Trust me, I know what it's like to feel obligated to follow a path others set for you. I was supposed to take over my father's position in the mining guild. Third-generation family tradition. But I wanted more, and your family accepted this. Eventually, after a lot of yelling and a few years of not speaking, he smiled ruefully. But we're okay now. They understand that I had to follow my own dreams. Humans, Lyra said softly. Your capacity for forgiveness is remarkable. My people hold grudges for generations. How long have you been away? 2 years. Standard. Long enough for my intended to bond with another. Thankfully, though, the political ramifications, not good. She shook her head. I shouldn't burden you with this. Hey. Without thinking, Marcus touched her shoulder. Her skin was warm, almost fever-hot, and seemed to pulse under his fingers. We're friends, right? Friends share burdens. She looked at his hand, then up at his face, her eyes swirling with colors he couldn't name. Friends. Yes, though I should warn you, on my world, touching like this implies a much deeper connection. Marcus started to pull his hand back, but she covered it with her own, keeping it in place. I didn't say I minded. Your human concepts of friendship are appealing. Less formal than what I knew. More genuine. They stood like that for a moment, watching the stars wheel past, her skin warm under his palm. Marcus was acutely aware of every point of contact, of the way her breathing had synchronized with his, of how the space between them seemed to boom with possibility. A sharp buzz from the door broke the spell. They jumped apart as a security alert flashed on their room's display. Attention residents of Sector 7G. An automated voice announced, Security sweep in progress. Please remain in your quarters. Lyra's skin flared bright white before settling into rapid, anxious pulses. Security sweep, that's not standard. Through their door's small window, Marcus could see uniformed security officers moving down the corridor, checking each room. But these weren't the usual station security. Their uniforms bore different insignia, and their weapons were military grade. "Those are Galactic Council enforcers," Lyra whispered, backing away from the door. "They shouldn't be here. The Academy is neutral territory." "Why would Council enforcers be doing a sweep?" Marcus asked, though the way Lyra's skin had gone pale gave him a sinking feeling he knew the answer. "They're looking for someone," she said quietly. "Someone important enough to violate Academy neutrality." The enforcers were 3 doors down now. Marcus could see them scanning each room with handheld devices, their faces hidden behind tactical visors. Lyra moved quickly, pulling out a small device from her desk drawer that he'd never seen before. "What is that?" "A biometric scrambler," she said, activating it with shaking fingers. "It should mask my signatures for a few minutes. But if they're specifically looking for me, they're looking for you." She met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked truly afraid. "Remember when I said my leaving had political ramifications? I may have understated the situation. 2 doors down." The enforcers were being thorough, spending several minutes in each room. Marcus's mind raced. The bathroom, the water reclamation tube, it's shielded to prevent contamination. Would that block their sensors? Maybe, but no time. He grabbed her hand, pulling her into the small bathroom. The reclamation tube was barely big enough for one person, designed for emergency decontamination. "Get in. Marcus, if they find you helping me, they won't." He helped her fold her tall frame into the tube, then activated the containment field. The shimmer of energy would block most scans. He hoped. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." He'd barely closed the bathroom door when their room chimed. No time to get to his desk to look casual. The door slid open, revealing 2 enforcers in full tactical gear. "Marcus Kane." The lead enforcer's voice was mechanically distorted. "Student ID 7739B. That's me." Marcus fought to keep his voice steady. "Is there a problem? Routine security check." The enforcer stepped inside, his partner remaining at the door. "You have a roommate." "Lyra Nexus." "Yeah, but she's at her lab. Evening xenobiology seminar." The lie came easily. Too easily. "She usually doesn't get back until after midnight," the enforcer consulted his handheld device, which beeped steadily as he swept it around the room. "We'll need to verify that. You won't mind if we check the facilities?" "Go ahead." Marcus stepped aside, his heart hammering so hard he was sure they could hear it. "Though I should warn you, I had beans for lunch. The bathroom's not exactly pleasant right now." The enforcer paused at the bathroom door, and Marcus held his breath. Through the small window, he could see the scanner in the man's hand, its display flickering with readings. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. "Clear," the enforcer announced, turning back. "If your roommate returns, please have her report to Security Station C7 immediately for her own safety." "Her safety?" Marcus couldn't help asking. "Is she in some kind of danger?" The enforcer's visor turned toward him, reflective and unreadable. "That depends entirely on her cooperation." "Good evening, Mr. Kane." They left, the door hissing shut behind them. Marcus waited, counting to 100 before rushing to the bathroom. Lyra practically fell out of the tube when he deactivated the field, her skin flickering through a rapid spectrum of colors. "They're gone," he said, steadying her. "But they want you to report to them." "Said it was for your safety." She laughed, but it was hollow. "My safety. That's rich. More like for their convenience." She sank onto the closed toilet, running her hands through her hair. "I can't believe you lied to council enforcers for me. What kind of roommate would I be if I didn't?" He tried for levity, but the gravity of what just happened was sinking in. "Lyra, what's really going on? Who are you?" She looked up at him, her eyes swirling with that nameless color again. "You really want to know? Even if it puts you at risk?" "I think we're past that point." She stood, squaring her shoulders as if preparing for battle. My full name is Lyronessa Orionus Nexara, third daughter of the luminous house of Nexus Prime. My mother sits on the inner council of the hegemony. My bloodline can be traced back over 1,000 cycles. And the marriage I fled from, it was to the crown prince of the Axiom Consortium. Marcus stared at her. You're a princess. The term doesn't translate exactly, but essentially, yes. She moved back into their room, checking the door locks. The Union would have merged two of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. My refusal didn't just embarrass my family. It destabilized an entire political ecosystem. And now they've found you. It appears so. She pulled out a bag from under her bed, one he'd never seen before, and began packing with efficient movements. I need to leave tonight before they realize their scan was scrambled. Wait, just hold on. Marcus caught her arm as she reached for her clothes. Where will you go? Do you have a plan? I'll figure something out. I always do. But her voice tindered, betraying her uncertainty. There are ships leaving tonight for the Outer Rim. I can probably... No. She blinked at him. No, you're not running off alone to the Outer Rim. That's insane. He ran his hands through his hair, thinking furiously. Look, my cousin works in the merchant district. He knows people, traders who don't ask questions. We can... She stared at him. Marcus, you can't get involved in this. You don't understand what you're risking. I understand enough. He met her gaze steadily. You're my friend. You're in trouble. That's all I need to know. This isn't one of your human romantic comedies, she said desperately. This is real. The people looking for me have resources you can't imagine. If they find out you helped me, then we'd better make sure they don't find out. He grabbed his own bag, starting to pack. We need to move fast. They'll check your lab next. Realize I lied. That gives us maybe an hour. Marcus, please. She caught his hands, stopping his packing. Think about what you're doing. Your studies, your dreams of being an engineer. They'll be gone. They'll still be here when this is sorted out. He squeezed her hands, noting how perfectly they fit in his. But you might not be, if I let you face this alone. Her skin began to glow with that soft pulsing he'd learned meant she was experiencing strong emotion. Why? Why would you risk everything for me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither had been willing to acknowledge. Marcus could give her the safe answer. Friendship, roommate loyalty, basic decency. But standing there, holding her hands, seeing the vulnerability in her alien features, he found himself speaking a deeper truth. Because, he said softly, somewhere between you mocking my human modesty and sharing your tragic backstory, you became important to me. More important than I realized until right now. Her eyes were a swirling galaxy of colors he'd never seen before. Marcus, I get it, he blurted out, his heart pounding. Different species, different worlds, a ridiculously complicated political mess. I know every single reason why this is a terrible idea, but what I also know is that I'm not letting you just walk out that door alone. For a beat, she just stared, her expression unreadable. Then, in a movement too fast for him to track, her lips were on his. It was nothing like kissing a human. Hers were warmer, impossibly soft, and sent a little jolt like static electricity through his entire nervous system. Her hands gently cupped his face, and he could feel the strange, steady rhythm of her pulse through her palms. It was fast and alien and felt absolutely perfect. When she drew back, her skin was literally glowing, so bright he had to squint. That was... what's the human word for it? Inappropriate. Very, he managed to say, still completely dazed. Also, incredible. Good. Her smile was like watching a sunrise. Because if we're going to be on the run together, we might as well be inappropriate. Just then, a distant alarm started to blare. They'd found out. Lyra's glow vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sharp focus. "Time to move," she said, grabbing her pack. "I hope you were serious about that cousin of yours." "I was." Marcus snatched his own bag, his engineering textbook sitting forgotten on his desk. "Full disclosure, though, he's not exactly on the right side of the law himself." "Perfect." She paused at the doorway, glancing back at the room that had been their home for just a few short weeks. "I'm sorry I dragged you into all this." "I'm not." And he was surprised to find he meant it. Whatever happened next, dodging council enforcers, navigating the station's criminal underworld, facing down whatever political nightmare had sent her running, it was infinitely better than the thought of watching her leave. She reached for his hand, her fingers weaving through his in a way that felt both strange and completely right. "Ready?" "Not even a little bit," he admitted. "But let's go anyway." They slipped out into the empty corridor, two unlikely fugitives connected by friendship, fate, and something much deeper that neither of them was ready to put into words yet. Behind them, the alarms kicked into high gear, but ahead of them lay the sprawling, unknown territory of the station's lower levels and whatever future they could build for themselves there. As they ran, Marcus realized his dad had been wrong all along. He hadn't come to the academy to run from his responsibilities. He'd come here to find new ones. And the glowing alien woman running beside him, her hand held tight in his, felt like the most important one he would ever choose. The lower levels of Station Helix 9 were a whole other universe. Up in the academy sectors, everything was polished chrome and soft, clean light. Down here, the walls dripped with condensation, and the air had the metallic taste of desperation. Marcus kept a firm grip on Lyra's hand as they navigated down through service tunnels and forgotten corridors, just following the directions his cousin Jake had pinged to his device. "Stay close," Marcus whispered, as they stepped out into a packed marketplace that definitely wasn't on any official station directory. "And maybe try to turn down the glow a little? You're kind of a beacon right now." Lyra's skin flickered as she focused, dimming until it was just a faint, pearly shimmer. "Better?" "Much." But even dimmed down, she turned heads. Her height, her elegant way of moving, that otherworldly beauty she couldn't hide, she stood out like a diamond in the grimy, chaotic darkness of the station's guts. The merchant district was a tangled mess of narrow alleys and pop-up stalls, selling everything from black market tech to food that looked highly suspicious. Aliens of every shape and size haggled in a dozen different languages, while overhead, patched-together power cables sparked and buzzed. "Charming," Lyra commented, neatly avoiding a puddle of something thick and glowing. "Your cousin lives down here?" "Works here," Marcus clarified, checking the map on his comm. "Jake isn't really the settling down type." They found Jake's shop squeezed between a noodle bar run by a six-armed chef and a weapons stall whose inventory was definitely not approved by the academy. The sign hanging over the door flickered through a few languages before landing on one. "Jake's completely legitimate goods." "Subtle," Lyra deadpanned. Marcus pushed past the curtain of beads that served as a door. "Jake! It's Marcus! Your baby cousin!" A loud voice echoed from the back room before Jake appeared from behind a mountain of shipping crates. He was about 5 years older than Marcus, with the same dark hair. But where Marcus was slender from long hours studying, Jake was built solid from hard work. His wide grin vanished the second he saw Lyra. "Holy smokes, Marcus! You failed to mention your friend was a luminary." "Is that going to be a problem?" Marcus felt himself tense up. "A problem? Are you kidding me?" Jake's grin snapped right back. "Do you have any idea how valuable?" He caught Marcus's warning look and cleared his throat. "Right, emergency now. Cultural appreciation later." "So what's the story?" Marcus gave him the short version. "Council enforcers, political exile. We need to vanish." Jake listened, his face getting more serious with every word. "Council enforcers on a neutral station," he whistled. "Your friend must be someone pretty important." "Can you help us or not?" Marcus asked, getting anxious. The clock on his comm showed they'd been on the run for 40 minutes. By now, every security scanner on the station would be looking for them. "Of course I can help. I'm offended you had to ask." Jake walked over to a wall panel and typed in a code, revealing a hidden room. "But it's gonna cost you. Getting off station is never cheap, especially when you're this hot." "How much?" Lyra spoke for the first time, her voice so melodic it made Jake's eyes go wide. "For you? Let's just call it a favor. I have a feeling that having a luminary princess who owes me one might be very good for business someday." "How did you—" Marcus began. "Oh, please," Jake waved a hand dismissively. "The bioluminescence, the way she stands, that whole regal vibe. She's either royalty or the best con artist I've ever laid eyes on. And since the council is involved, my money's on royalty." "You're very well informed for a simple smuggler," Lyra noted. "Traitor," Jake corrected her smoothly. "I'm a trader who sometimes helps with time-sensitive deliveries. And speaking of which..." He pulled out a data pad, his fingers flying across the screen. "I have a buddy making a supply run to the frontier stations. His ship leaves in 3 hours. It's not exactly a luxury cruise, but it'll get you out of council-controlled space." "We'll take it," Marcus said without hesitation. "Hang on, hero. There are a few conditions." Jake's expression got serious. "First, you need new identities. I can handle that, but you'll have to lay low for at least 2 hours while I work my magic. Second, you'll be on the manifest as indentured workers. It's not pretty, but it's a good cover for why you're traveling together." "And third?" Lyra asked. "Third, once you're out there, you are completely on your own. I can get you on that ship, but after that, I can't protect you." "Understood," she said, her tone formal. "We accept your terms." Jake nodded and then pointed his thumb toward the hidden room. "The safe house is through there. No windows, one way in or out. The walls are shielded against most scans. There's food and water in the cooler. Just try not to break anything. Some of that junk is worth more than your entire education." Marcus started to go, but Jake grabbed his arm. "You sure about this, cuz? This isn't some game you're playing at the academy. You're tossing away everything you've worked for." "Not tossing it away," Marcus said softly. "Just putting it on hold." Jake looked at him for a long moment, then glanced over at Lyra, who was curiously inspecting the entrance to the safe house. "She must be one of a kind." "She is," Marcus admitted. "Well, I hope she's worth it," Jake said, clapping him on the shoulder. 2 hours. Don't leave that room, no matter what." The safe house was bigger than it looked, filled with a strange mix of salvaged luxury furniture and practical supplies. Crates were stacked against the walls, their contents a mystery. In a small living area, a couch that had seen better days faced a hollow projector, which was currently showing a security alert featuring clear images of their faces. "Well," Lyra said, collapsing onto the couch, "it's official. We're fugitives." Marcus sat down next to her as the weight of their situation finally hit him. "Having second thoughts?" she asked quietly. "Are you?" He thought about it. In just 1 hour, he'd gone from a top engineering student to a wanted man. The future he'd planned so carefully had just vanished, like air venting from a cracked hull. He should have been terrified. Instead, as he looked at Lyra, her glow dim with exhaustion, and her usual confidence showing tiny cracks, all he felt was a strange sense of calm. "No," he said. "No second thoughts." She smiled, and the expression transformed her alien features into something breathtakingly beautiful. "Good, because I have something to confess." "Another one? Are you secretly the empress of the entire galaxy?" "No, but—" She turned to face him completely. "The night of the water heater incident, I didn't actually forget my lab samples." Marcus just blinked at her. "What?" "I came back to the dorm early on purpose. I had looked up the water reclamation schedule and figured out when you'd most likely be using the emergency tub. Her skin turned a deep shade of blue. I wanted to see you. You planned it? Not the part where I fell, she said quickly. That was a genuine accident. But the timing? Not so much. Marcus wasn't sure if he should laugh or be angry. Why? Because, she said, her voice dropping into a lower, richer tone that sent a shiver down his spine. From the very first moment I met you, I was curious. You were so different from all the other humans I'd read about, so serious about your rules and boundaries, but so genuinely kind. You treated me like I was a person, not some curiosity or a political pawn. Of course I did. You are a person. You would be surprised, she said softly. How many people don't see it that way? She reached out, her fingers hovering in the air just inches from his face, not quite making contact. On my world, we don't play games. We don't hide what we feel. So I'm going to be direct. I've wanted you since the day we met. Marcus felt his throat go tight. Lyra, it's complicated, he managed. But she pressed on. I know. Different species, different planets. And oh yeah, we're on the run for our lives. But from what I've learned about humans, you always find hope when things are messy. You find a connection when it seems impossible. Is that what this is, a connection? Before he could answer, she closed the space between them. This wasn't like their first frantic kiss back at the academy. This was slow, searching. Her fingers laced into his hair as his arms circled her waist, pulling her flush against him. She tasted like starlight and the air after a storm, something completely alien and entirely her. When they finally pulled away for air, her skin was thrumming with that soft, inner light. On my world, she whispered, her lips brushing his. This is how we declare our intention to bond. And on mine, Marcus breathed back, his voice thick. We call this being head over heels for someone. A laugh escaped her, a sound like tiny bells that filled the cramped room with warmth. Head over heels? I like that. It sounds just as chaotic as our situation. A loud knock rattled the door, forcing them apart. Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. Sorry to break up the interspecies diplomacy, but we have a major problem. Marcus was at the door in an instant. What's wrong? The kind of problem that wears a badge and carries a stun baton, Jake said, his face grim. Council enforcers are doing a full sweep of the district. Somebody must have tipped them off. They'll be here in 20 minutes, maybe less. I thought this place was supposed to be safe. It is, from standard scans. But a door-to-door search? Jake just shook his head. That's game over. We have to push up the plan. Now! Lyra was already on her feet, her whole demeanor shifting from gentle to combat-ready. Tell us what to do. Jake held out 2 small metallic objects. Subdermal identity chips. They're gonna sting going in, but they're your only way out of here. New names, clean slates. Marcus eyed the chip. You're sure these will fool a council scanner? Long enough to get you to the ship. Jake pulled out an injector gun. Who wants to go first? Lyra held out her arm, not even flinching. The injector hissed, and a sharp wince crossed her face as the chip slid under her skin. A second later, her eyes went distant as the new data streamed directly to her neural implant. Vera Ash, she murmured, reading from a screen only she could see. Botanical specialist from the outer colonies. A boring life, no messy political ties. She managed a small smile. I like it. Marcus was next. He clenched his jaw as the chip dug into his forearm, the data upload feeling like ice spreading through his veins. It was a strange sensation, a foreign program rewriting who he was. Max Carpenter, he read aloud. Maintenance tech, level 2. And together, we're a bonded pair looking for work on the frontier. Bonded? Lyra's eyebrow shot up. It's the simplest cover story for a human and a luminary traveling together, Jake cut in. The alternative is being registered as cargo and sold separately. No, they both said at the same time, then glanced at each other. Jake rolled his eyes. Great, you're smitten. Save it for the honeymoon. He tossed them each a set of worn-out workers' coveralls. Get changed. You have to look the part. The rough material was a world away from their soft academy uniforms. Marcus had to help Lyra with the fit. Standard human sizes weren't made for her tall, slender frame. How do I look? She asked, trying to dim the natural glow of her skin. Like the tallest, most beautiful mechanic I've ever seen, Marcus said, and he meant it. Flatterer. But she smiled, and he could see some of the tension leave her shoulders. Jake returned, pushing a large cart piled high with supply crates. Your escape pod awaits. You'll ride in the back, under these thermal blankets. They'll mask your life signs. It won't be comfortable, but it's our only shot. And when we get to the ship? Marcus asked. Captain Reeves takes over from there. She owes me a few favors, enough to make sure you get a fair shake. It's a 6-week trip to the frontier. By then, the heat should be off you long enough to figure out what's next. Lyra placed a hand on Jake's arm, a gesture of deep respect for her people. Your help will be remembered when I reclaim my position. With all due respect, Princess, I really hope you don't, Jake said with a crooked but honest grin. You two deserve a shot at a normal life, not more of that political nonsense. Distant sirens wailed, getting closer with each second. Jake's face hardened. Time's up. Get in the cart. Now. They scrambled in, finding space between the crates. It was a tight squeeze. Marcus found himself pressed right up against Lyra, her arm wrapping around him as the cart started to move. Jake threw the heavy blankets over them, plunging them into a hot, suffocating darkness. Remember, Jake's muffled voice warned them. Not one sound until I give the all clear. Your lives are on the line. The cart jolted forward. Marcus tried to focus on just breathing, trying to ignore the feel of Lyra's body pressed against his. Her hand found his in the dark and gave it a reassuring squeeze. Time became a meaningless blur. The cart stopped and started, and Marcus could hear muffled voices, some friendly, some sharp and demanding. Each time, Jake's easygoing charm seemed to work, spinning stories about rush orders and demanding clients. Then a new voice cut through the air, a voice that turned Marcus's blood to ice. Halt! Random security inspection. The cart stopped dead. Footsteps crunched nearby, and Marcus heard the high-pitched whine of a military-grade scanner powering on. Beside him, Lyra went completely still, not even the sound of her breath disturbing the silence. What's in the crates? The enforcer's voice was cold and robotic. Protein bars for the dancers over at the Starlight Lounge, Jake answered, his voice impossibly calm. You know how they get when their orders are late. Scan them. Marcus's heart was pounding so hard he was sure the enforcer could hear it. The scanner whined as it got closer, and he felt Lyra's muscles tense, ready for a fight. Then, just as it was right on top of them, the scanner moved away. All clear, but... Wait a second. You look familiar. I get that a lot, Jake said casually. Just one of those faces. No, I've seen your file. The enforcer went quiet, and Marcus knew the man was running Jake's face through his internal database. Any second, the connection would be made. Jake was his cousin. He was the fugitive who helped the alien princess escape. Just then, a loud crash came from a nearby alley, followed by shouting. All units, Section C7, we have runners! The enforcer swore under his breath. Get moving, he barked at Jake, and stay out of C7 if you know what's good for you. The cart shot forward, moving much faster now. Marcus counted to 100 twice before he let himself breathe again. He realized Lyra's hand was still holding his, both of their palms slick with sweat. Apparently, even princesses from another galaxy got scared. After what felt like an eternity, the cart finally stopped. This time, Jake's voice was full of relief. All clear. Welcome to Docking Bay 47. They threw off the blankets, gulping down the stale, recycled air like it was the sweetest thing they'd ever tasted. In front of them sat a beat-up cargo ship that looked like it had been flying since the last century. The FSS Wanderer, read the faded paint on the side. Not exactly a luxury cruise, Jake shrugged, but she's sturdy. A woman in her mid-40s walked down the loading ramp, her face weathered and her eyes holding a look that said she'd seen it all. "These the packages?" she asked. "Captain Reeves, meet Max and Vera, your new crew members," Jake said. Reeves gave them a quick once-over. "Can you work?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. "Good. I don't carry dead weight." She nodded towards the ship. "Bay 3 is yours. It's small, but it's private. You pull your own weight, we'll get along. You cause me any trouble, and I'll toss you out the airlock. Clear?" "Crystal," Lyra answered. "Then get on board. We lift off in 10. Marcus turned back to Jake, not knowing what to say. His cousin saved him the trouble, pulling him into a quick, rough hug. "Take care of yourself, cuz. And take care of her." He nodded towards Lyra. "I've got a feeling you two are gonna need each other." "Jake, Save it. Just name your first kid after me," Jake said, his grin not quite reaching his worried eyes. "Now get going before I start charging you for the emotional farewell." They hurried up the ramp, following the captain's directions to their new room. Bay 3 was tiny, not much bigger than a closet, with 2 small bunks built into the wall and a single locker. But the door locked, and for the first time in days, no one was actively hunting them. Marcus collapsed onto the lower bunk, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving him exhausted and shaky. "We actually made it." "This is just the first step," Lyra corrected, sitting down next to him. Her skin was back to its normal soft glow now that the danger had passed. "We have a long way to go. 6 weeks to plan our next move." "6 weeks," she repeated, and then she smiled. "Whatever will we do with all that time?" The ship's engines began to hum, and Marcus felt the floor vibrate as they lifted off. Far below them, council enforcers were still searching, still on the hunt. But here, in this tiny metal room with an alien princess who had turned his life completely upside down, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm. "I can think of a few things," he said, smiling back at her. She let out that beautiful, chime-like laugh he was already starting to love and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good, because I have a few ideas myself. We can start by going over that bonded pair cover story of Jake's." "What about it?" "Well," she said, her voice full of playful innocence, "if we're going to be pretending to be a bonded pair, we should probably know what that means. In both our cultures. You know, for authenticity. Purely for authenticity," Marcus agreed, trying not to grin. "You got it. In my culture, for example, bonded pairs share everything. Their rooms, their food, their very thoughts." She found his hand with hers again. "It's a lot like human marriage, just way more intense. And how can you tell who's a bonded pair?" "Oh, that part's easy." She held up their joined hands, and Marcus couldn't help but gasp as a pattern he'd never seen before began to glow on her skin. It was made of delicate spirals of light that seemed to flow from her hand into his, leaving behind faint traces on his skin that slowly faded. Biometric synchronization. Our life force literally tunes into each other. "That's beautiful," Marcus whispered. Completely mesmerized by the light show dancing across their hands. "It's also permanent," she added softly. "Once a true synchronization happens, the pair is connected for the rest of their lives. Not even death can completely break that bond." Marcus looked up at her, seeing the sheer weight of that truth in her eyes. "Is that what's happening to us?" "I have no idea," she confessed. "This has never happened with a human before. We're completely off the map here." The ship gave a heavy shudder as it finally broke free from the station's docking clamps. Through the tiny porthole, Marcus watched Helix 9 drift away, getting smaller and smaller with every second that passed. His entire old life, all his dreams, his perfectly mapped-out future, all of it was shrinking down to a single speck of light in the vast darkness. No second thoughts? Lyra asked him again, her eyes following his. Marcus tore his gaze away from the window and focused on the incredible woman standing next to him. No matter what was coming next, life on frontier colonies, brand new identities, the constant fear of being found, none of it felt nearly as scary as the thought of facing it all without her. No, he said, his voice firm. No second thoughts at all. And then she kissed him, a kiss that was soft and sweet. As the Wanderer leaped into hyperspace, Marcus felt like he could see their entire future stretching out in front of them. It was uncertain and dangerous, but it was also sparkling with possibilities. 6 weeks to get to the frontier, 6 weeks to get to know each other, to map out their next moves, to figure out what they were to each other besides just fugitives sharing a room. It would have to be enough. The Wanderer had been traveling through hyperspace for 3 weeks when it all went to hell. Marcus had just wrapped up his shift down in the engine room. Captain Reeves ran a tight ship, and their cover story as simple workers meant they had to actually work. He had just settled into their quarters when Lyra burst in, her skin flashing urgent, frantic patterns of red and white. "We need to talk," she said, sealing the door shut behind her. "Now!" Marcus sat up straight. He'd been looking over some technical manuals on his datapad. In the few weeks since they'd made their escape, they'd fallen into a routine that felt almost normal. Almost. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I've been listening in on the communications from the bridge during my night shifts." She started pacing the tiny room. 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. "They've been talking about us, putting out bounty postings. The reward just tripled." "Tripled?" Marcus felt his stomach sink. "How much are we worth now?" "Enough to buy a small moon." She finally stopped pacing and faced him with a look he was starting to recognize as very bad news. "But that's not even the worst part. They're not just after me anymore. They've officially labeled you a co-conspirator and charged you with attempted regicide." "Regicide? But you're not dead." "No, but my wonderful ex-fiancé apparently faked an assassination attempt and pinned it on me. He claims I tried to kill him to get out of the marriage." Her laugh was cold and bitter. "It's a classic move by the Axiom Consortium. If you can't control someone, you destroy them." Marcus stood up and crossed the room in 2 strides. Over the last few weeks, casual touches had become second nature, and he didn't even think twice before taking her hands in his. "We knew this could happen. We'll figure it out. There's more." She squeezed his hands, her skin fading to a worried shade of gray. "I recognized one of the communication signatures. It's coming from inside this ship. Someone on the crew? Or maybe a passenger? The Wanderer took on some new cargo at our last stop, remember? Along with 3 new workers." She locked eyes with him. "One of them isn't who they say they are." Marcus's mind was racing. The ship's crew was tiny, besides Reeves. There was the grumpy engineer, Kowalski, the Alaran navigator named Zix, and now these 3 newcomers. How long do we have until they make a move? It could be days, or it could be hours. It really depends on if they want to take us in alive or just collect the bounty on our dead bodies. That's comforting. Marcus walked over to their small storage locker and pulled out the emergency kit they'd put together. "We have to tell Reeves." "Number." Lyra's answer was instant and sharp. "We don't know if we can trust her. For all we know, she's been setting us up from the very beginning." Jake trusted her. Jake's trust might have been a mistake. She joined him by the locker, expertly packing essentials into a small go bag. "We need to be ready to bolt at a moment's notice." A soft chime from the door made both of them freeze in place. Marcus glanced at the time. 21:47 hours. Way too late for a social call. "Maintenance check," a muffled voice called from the other side of the door. "Environmental systems." Marcus and Lyra shot each other a look. There was no maintenance scheduled, and that definitely wasn't Kowalski's voice. "Just a minute," Marcus called back, signaling for Lyra to hide behind the door. He snatched a heavy wrench from his toolkit. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The door slid open to reveal one of the new workers, a human male with a completely forgettable face, but eyes that were anything but. Those eyes scanned the room with professional precision before landing on Marcus. "Where's the luminary?" The act was dropped instantly, replaced by a cold, hard efficiency. The man's hand drifted toward his hip, where the bulge of a barely hidden weapon was visible under his coveralls. Marcus didn't have time to think. 3 weeks of working in the engine room had brought back all the strength he'd built up in the mines. He swung the wrench in a tight, fast arc, connecting with the man's wrist just as he was drawing his weapon. The plasma pistol flew through the air, clattering onto the floor. The bounty hunter, because that's obviously what he was, let out a snarl and lunged forward. Marcus met him head-on, and they both slammed into the corridor wall. The guy was a trained fighter, throwing precise punches that would have knocked Marcus out cold if he hadn't spent years brawling with miners twice his size. A sharp knee to Marcus's ribs knocked the wind out of him. He doubled over, just barely managing to block the next punch aimed at his throat. The wrench slipped from his numb fingers as the hunter grabbed his collar and slammed him back against the wall. "Last chance," the man hissed. "Where is she?" "Right here," Lyra said. The hunter spun around, but Lyra was already a blur of motion. She moved like flowing water, like light itself. Her natural grace had been transformed into something lethal. An open palm strike hit the hunter square in the solar plexus. A quick sweep of his legs, and just like that, he was on the ground, gasping for air. "Luminary combat training," she explained, noticing Marcus's shocked face. "Did you really think all we learned was politics and poetry?" The hunter tried to get up, but Lyra's hand on his throat kept him pinned down. Her skin started to glow. It wasn't the soft, gentle light Marcus was used to, but something harder, more dangerous. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man's eyes went wide as her touch started to burn him. It wasn't enough to cause permanent damage, but it was enough to hurt. The contract was posted through the usual channels. "Big money for both of you. Bigger for you alive. Who else on this ship knows?" "Nobody." "I work alone," he gasped out as her grip got tighter. "But when I don't check in, others will come. You can't run forever, Princess." "Watch me," Lyra said. "Lyra." She pressed 2 fingers against the man's temple, and her glow pulsed once, bright and sharp. The hunter's eyes rolled back in his head, and he went completely limp. "Is he just unconscious?" "A neural shock. He'll wake up with a killer headache and a few gaps in his memory." She stood up, wiping her hands on her coveralls. "But he's right. More will come." Suddenly, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Marcus grabbed their emergency bag while Lyra scooped up the hunter's weapon. They could hear the sound of running feet and shouted orders from the corridor. "So much for being subtle," Marcus muttered. They ran, ducking into a maintenance shaft that Lyra had found during one of her explorations. The Wanderer wasn't a huge ship, but it was old, which meant it had countless modifications and forgotten crawl spaces. They scurried through dusty conduits, with Lyra guiding them using her perfect memory of the ship's blueprints. They dropped down into the cargo bay just as Captain Reeves's voice came crackling over the comm system. "All hands, we have a situation. Lockdown protocols are now in effect. Max Carpenter and Vera Ash. Report to the bridge immediately." "Fat chance of that," Marcus whispered. The cargo bay was dimly lit, filled with towering stacks of containers that created a maze of deep shadows. They moved slowly, knowing that any member of the crew could be hiding in there. Lyra pointed towards a small shuttle magnetically locked to the far wall of the bay. "An emergency evacuation pod. It's not much, but..." Suddenly, the bay was flooded with bright lights. They spun around to see Reeves standing at the main entrance, with Kowalski and 2 of the other new workers on either side of her. All of them were armed. "Going somewhere?" Reeves asked, her weathered face impossible to read. "Captain," Marcus began, but she silenced him with a quick gesture. "Save it. I know who you really are. I've known since Jake first brought you on board." She took a step forward, her weapon still pointed down, but at the ready. The only question is, what am I going to do about it? The bounty, Lyra said simply. It's enough to retire on. That it is, Reeves agreed, studying them. Enough to buy a brand new ship. Leave this whole life behind. It's very tempting. The two workers next to her started to get fidgety. One of them, Aurelian, whose scales shone like an oil slick, spoke up. Enough of this talk. Let's just stun them and collect our money. Did I ask for your opinion? Reeves snapped back. This is my ship, and this is my call. Actually, the Rylian said, raising his weapon, possession is 9/10 of the law. Reeves moved faster than Marcus ever would have thought possible. Her stunner fired, hitting the Rylian square in the chest and dropping him to the floor instantly. The other worker barely had time to react before Kowalski's massive fist connected with his jaw. I hate mutineers, Reeves said, as if she were just chatting about the weather, holstering her weapon. I also hate bounty hunters. No offense to the profession, but they're really bad for business. Marcus slowly lowered the plasma pistol he had instinctively raised. Don't you worry, kid. We're not turning you in. I've been skirting the law for 30 years. You think you're the first fugitives I've ever hidden? A smile wiped a decade off her face. Besides, Jake didn't just ask for a favor. He paid well for it. Said something about family being everything. Now about that lockdown and the big announcement. That was all for show. We had to convince our sleeping beauty in the hallway that we were playing by the rules. Kowalski was already zip-tying the bounty hunter with the skill of a pro. I do have to ask about that little light show that put him down, though. A luminary neural touch, Lyra said, nodding slowly. So you know about my people? Honey, I've been around, Reeves said, pointing toward the shuttle. And that's not a bad idea. Not the escape part, though. We're 3 days out from anywhere, deep in hyperspace. But that shuttle is armed and shielded. It's a much safer place to lay low for the trip than your little cabin. Wait, Marcus cut in. You're still taking us to the frontier? A contract's a contract, but the rules have changed. Reeves's face grew serious. 3 bounty hunters found my ship. That tells me someone sold our route. So we're taking a detour, swapping out our transponder codes, and you two are going to fill me in on why it seems like the whole galaxy is after you. For the next hour, squeezed into the tight confines of the shuttle, they laid it all out for her. The forced marriage, the political fallout, their desperate escape from the academy. The captain just listened, her gaze steady, nodding every so often as the whole messy picture came into focus. All right, let me see if I've got this right, she said once they were done. You're a princess who bolted from a wedding you didn't want. And you're the unlucky guy who fell for her. So now, the prince you left at the altar is screaming assassination attempt to protect his pride, and every hunter this side of the outer rim wants a piece of that bounty. That's a pretty good summary, Lyra conceded. And the two of you are, what, in love? Reeves eyed them both, a knowing look on her face. Marcus and Lyra shared a look. The past few weeks had been a blur of shared meals, hushed late-night talks, and moments that felt like something more, but neither had dared to name the feeling growing between them. It's complicated, Marcus finally mumbled. It always is. Reeves stood up, stretching her back. Well, complicated or not, you're part of my crew until we hit the frontier. After that, she shrugged. I know a guy. He can hook you up with new identities. Good ones this time. But it's gonna cost you. We'll pay whatever it takes, Lyra said without hesitation. I'm not talking about credits, princess. I'm talking about disappearing. For real. That means no more walking around like royalty. No more fighting the good fight. You'll have to be a nobody. Live like a nobody. Probably forever. Reeves locked her gaze on Lyra. Are you really ready for that? To give up any hope of ever going home? Of clearing your name? Of taking back what's yours? Lyra didn't answer for a long, heavy moment. Marcus watched the colors shift across her skin, a language he was slowly learning to understand. Doubt, then fear, then a wave of pure determination. At last, she took his hand. "My birthright was never anything more than a gilded cage," she said, her voice low but steady. "If being a nobody means I get to be free, to be with the person I choose, then yes, I'm willing." "And what about you?" Reeves's attention snapped to Marcus. "You threw away your schooling, your entire future, for her. What happens when this all gets old? When she's not some exotic princess anymore, just another runaway trying to scrape by?" Marcus felt Lyra go stiff next to him, and he squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll have everything I've ever wanted. A partner, an equal, someone who looks at me and sees more than just a miner's kid pretending to be an engineer." "You are an engineer," Lyra insisted, her voice full of fire. "A brilliant one." "See?" Marcus grinned at Reeves. "She has more faith in me than I have in myself. How could I ever leave that?" Reeves just stared at them for another second, and then she let out a laugh, a rough, rusty sound, like it was an engine that hadn't been started in years. "Jake was right about you two. You're either going to take over the galaxy or get yourselves killed trying." She walked over to the shuttle hatch. "You two stay put tonight. I'll have Kowalski run you some food and supplies in the morning. Then we can start figuring out your new lives." She stopped in the doorway. "Oh, and kids? Next time you think there's a threat on my ship, you come to me first. I have ways of handling bounty hunters that are a lot more inventive than a neural shock." Once she was gone, Marcus and Lyra sat in a comfortable silence. The shuttle was small, but the stacks of emergency supplies, blankets, and rations made it feel almost cozy. Outside the tiny window, the wild colors of hyperspace churned endlessly. "She's right, you know," Lyra finally broke the quiet. "About everything I'm leaving behind. My name, my family, any hope of getting justice." "Are you having second thoughts?" "No." She turned to look him straight in the eye. "But you need to understand exactly what this means for you. We'll be living in the shadows, constantly looking over our shoulders, never really being who we are." "Lyra." Marcus gently cupped her face in his hands, her skin feeling warm against his palms. "I knew what I was getting into the second I helped you hide from those guards at the academy. Maybe even sooner. Maybe it was the first time you walked out of that washroom and flipped my whole world on its head." She relaxed into his touch, her eyes a swirl of unearthly colors. "Even if we can never go back, even if we have to be nobodies forever, we won't be nobody," he said, his voice firm. "We'll be us. Max and Vera, or whatever names we pick next. We'll build a life, just for us, one day at a time. You make it all sound so easy. The best things in life usually are." And then she kissed him. It was a deep, urgent kiss, as if she was trying to pour all of her fear and all of her hope into him at once. Marcus kissed her back just as fiercely, his fingers weaving into her glowing hair, pulling her tight against him. When they finally pulled away, her skin was shining with a pattern he had only seen one other time, a soft, bonding light that coiled in tiny wisps between them. "It's happening again," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the light playing over their clasped hands. "The synchronization. It feels stronger this time." "What does it mean? I have no idea. This has never happened between two different species before." She looked up at him, her expression so open and vulnerable it made his chest ache. "Are you scared?" Marcus actually considered it. Logically, he should be petrified. He was a wanted man, hiding out in a tiny shuttle, and apparently going through some kind of permanent alien bonding ritual with a woman he'd met less than 2 months ago. But instead of fear, all he felt was a deep, unshakable sense of calm. "No," he said, and he meant it. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." A brilliant, genuine smile spread across her face. Together. Beyond their little haven, the ship was alive with the sounds of Reeves preparing for their new course. In just a few days, they would arrive at the frontier, where a new life and new threats were waiting. The political games back in the core worlds wouldn't stop. The bounty hunters wouldn't give up. And the future Marcus had always imagined for himself was gone for good. But right here, right now, in this little shuttle with an alien princess who had given up a throne for him, Marcus felt like he had already won the grand prize. The light connecting them pulsed one last time before settling into a gentle, constant glow. 2 lives, 2 species, 1 future. They were ready for whatever came next. The frontier planet of Kaza was a world away from the sterile perfection of the Academy. Here, a trio of suns bathed the sky in a permanent state of twilight, and the air was thick with the smells of ozone and strange alien spices. Marcus and Lyra, now officially Dax and Vera Wright, according to their fresh new identity chips, stood on the outskirts of a massive market, just taking in the beautiful chaos. "Reeves's contact has to be around here somewhere," Lyra whispered, keeping her skin's natural glow muted under her cloak's deep hood. The captain had left them with a set of coordinates and a name, Talk Mal, the best information broker in the system. And then Marcus saw it, a tiny storefront squeezed between a sizzling protein stall and a shop overflowing with blasters and knives. The sign above the door blinked Mal's miscellany in 7 different languages. The inside was even more cluttered, packed to the ceiling with trinkets from 100 different planets. A 4-eyed Zethian looked up from behind the counter as they walked in, his eyes blinking one after the other. "You're late," he chirped, skipping any pleasantries. "Reeves said noon." "We had to be careful," Marcus answered, using the code phrase the captain had taught them. Talk's eyes seemed to move on their own, scanning each of them up and down. "Ah, the runaway princess and her human pet. You two have really stirred up the hornet's nest back in the core worlds." "We're not," Marcus began, but Lyra put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "What have you heard?" she asked, her voice calm. "Everything." Talk leaned back in his chair, tapping his chitinous fingertips together. "Prince Axiom has upped the bounty. It's dead or alive now, but he's offering a bonus if you're brought in breathing. Something about wanting the pleasure of a public execution for your betrayal." "Charming," Lyra said with a dry tone. "Oh, there's more," Talk said, producing a data slate and sliding it over to them. "Your little disappearing act has given other people ideas. 3 more high-profile political marriages have been called off in the last month. The entire noble class is furious." Marcus stared at the news clips scrolling on the screen. He saw protests on a dozen different worlds, young people from all kinds of species holding up signs with Lyra's face on them. "You've become a symbol," Talk noted. "And that's a very dangerous thing to be. Symbols draw followers, but they also draw assassins." "We just want to vanish," Lyra insisted. "Start over. Live a normal life." "That's hard to do when everyone in the galaxy recognizes your face." Talk's bottom pair of eyes narrowed. "But not impossible. I've got a proposal for you. We're all ears. There's a mining colony, 2 systems away from here. It's remote. So remote it's barely on the charts. They're desperate for engineers," he said, flicking a glance at Marcus. "And they happen to have a xenobiology lab that could really use an expert with your unique background." He looked at Lyra. "It means new identities, a steady paycheck, and a place where no one asks any questions." "What's the catch?" Marcus asked. "Because there's always a catch. The planet is nasty. The atmosphere is toxic to most life forms, so you'll need a suit to go outside. And..." Talk paused for a second. "There are stories. Ships that go there and don't come back. Miners who just disappear. The company pays a fortune because no one in their right mind wants the job." "Perfect," Lyra said instantly. "When does the transport leave?" "In 6 hours." Imagine being forced to erase the one thing that makes you unique, just to survive. That was the choice my friend Lyra faced, watching in a cold, metallic room as they injected her with chemicals to hide the starlight under her skin. Her beauty, a soft, celestial glow, was deemed too dangerous, a beacon for those hunting her. As they painfully muted her light, turning her ordinary, she whispered, "I hate this, hiding who I am." I promised her it was temporary, but in my heart I had to wonder if we'd ever truly be free. Stick around to see if a brilliant engineer and a runaway princess can find a place to call home in a galaxy that wants them erased. Our getaway ride was a complete rust bucket, a cargo hauler that made our last ship look like a palace. We were crammed in with a dozen other people who looked like they were running from something too. No one spoke, no one made eye contact. That's the code when you're on the run. The 4-day trip was agony. The suppressants made Lyra terribly sick, leaving her weak and dizzy. I did what I could, but I felt useless watching her shiver in our tiny bunk. On the 3rd night, she laid her head in my lap and murmured, "Tell me a story, Marcus. Distract me. Tell me why you really threw your whole life away for me." I gently stroked her now dull hair, thinking of what to say. I grew up on Mining Station 7, just me and my dad. He was a miner. His dad was a miner. He wanted the same for me. Lyra looked up. "But that wasn't your dream." "Not even close," I admitted. "I wanted to build things, not break them. I'd spend all my free time tinkering with junk, making little bots, fixing machines the senior techs had given up on." A small smile touched my face. "Dad said I was wasting my talent. We fought about it all the time, right up until the day a cave-in nearly took me. That's when he finally realized you can't force your dreams onto your kids." My hand paused. "Right before we fled, he sent me a message. Said he was proud of me for following my heart." "He sounds like a good man," she whispered. "He'd love you," I said. "Once he got over the whole glowing alien princess thing." That got a weak laugh out of her. "Former princess. Now I'm just a ghost. Nothing special." I stopped her right there. "You will always be special to me." She turned, and even without her full glow, her eyes were like swirling galaxies. "Even like this? Sick and plain?" "Especially like this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Because this is you, choosing us, choosing me. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." She reached up and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like medicine and pure grit. We finally arrived at Mining Colony X-47 during a dust storm that painted the sky a sickening orange. The colony was a depressing sight, a cluster of pressurized domes connected by walkways, looking like ugly metal blisters on the planet's rusty face. "Welcome to paradise," the pilot grumbled over the intercom. The administrator, a woman named Foster with leathery skin and cold, hard eyes, processed us without a fuss. "We can always use engineers. Report to Chief Hollings in the morning." She then gave Lyra a long, hard look. "And you! Dr. Caney at the research station is desperate for an assistant. Hope you're not squeamish." Our new home was a single, sterile room in Dome 3. After weeks on the run, a room with a locking door felt like the ultimate luxury. "Home sweet home," I said, dropping our bags. Lyra went straight to the small window, gazing at the desolate landscape. "It's nothing like my home," she said softly. "We had 3 moons that bathed the night in silver." "Do you miss it?" I asked. "Every single day," she admitted, turning back to me. "But I would rather be here in this metal box with you than back there in a golden cage." That night, we shoved the 2 narrow beds together and just held on to each other while the storm howled outside. As the suppressants started to wear off, a faint glow returned to her skin. "We need more," she said, her voice tight. "Or," I suggested gently, "we could see what happens." "This is the frontier," I continued. "Everyone here has a past. If someone recognizes you, we'll face it. Together." She thought about it for a long time before nodding. "Okay, but slowly. I can't go from human to supernova overnight." The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. I wasn't digging ore, but fixing the complex machines that did. My boss, Chief Hollings, was a gruff old engineer who valued results over chit-chat. After I completely redesigned a filtration system that had plagued them for months, he just grunted, "You're good. Too good for a dump like this. What are you running from, kid? Does it matter?" I shot back. "Nope. Just keep your trouble away from my machinery," he said. And that was that. Lyra, meanwhile, was flourishing at the research station, studying the weird microorganisms that lived in the toxic air. Her boss, Dr. Caney, was a sweet, absent-minded scientist who was just thrilled to have a competent assistant. "Incredible," he'd exclaim as Lyra isolated a new specimen. "Your methods are so advanced." She'd let a little more of her glow show in the lab, passing it off as a rare skin condition. Caney was too lost in his work to care. Our evenings became our sanctuary. We cooked simple meals, argued about what shows to watch, and just enjoyed the feeling of being a normal couple. It was a kind of happiness I'd never known. "Is this what you dreamed of?" Lyra asked me one night, about 3 months in. "Pristine labs, groundbreaking projects, fame?" I pulled her close, feeling the gentle, warm pulse of her light. "No," I admitted. "This is so much better." But our peace was shattered by the arrival of a new survey team. They claimed to be looking for mineral deposits, but they watched everyone a little too closely. They were asking questions that had nothing to do with rocks and everything to do with who was new on the colony. "Bounty hunters?" Lyra asked, her voice laced with fear. "Or worse," I said. "Government agents." We started being more careful, but the real threat came from a place neither of us expected. Lyra burst into our room one night, her eyes wide. "Marcus, the microorganisms, they're not natural. They're engineered." A chill went down my spine. "Engineered by who?" "They're genetic markers," she said, her voice trembling. "They match bioweapons from the Third Axiom War." "The company has to know," I said, my mind racing. "You don't just build a colony on top of a banned weapons test site." She began pacing, her inner light flaring with agitation. "We have to get out of here. Tonight!" "I agree," I said. But just then, the main power cut out. Red emergency lights flooded the room, and alarms started blaring. "Contamination breach in Sector 7, a robotic voice announced. "All personnel, remain in your quarters." I looked out the window and saw figures in full hazmat suits moving through the tunnels with military precision. "That's no breach," I said grimly. "It's a trap." A loud bang on our door made us both jump. "Colony security, open up!" I recognized the voice. It was one of the fake surveyors. I grabbed a plasma cutter from my toolbox as Lyra held up a specimen container filled with something that was definitely not harmless bacteria. "We know you're in there, princess," the voice sneered. "Come out quietly, and your human pet gets to live." Lyra's skin was now blazing with defiant light. "Counteroffer," she called back. "You walk away now, and I don't smash this vial and release a plague that'll make this planet uninhabitable for centuries." After a moment of shocked silence, he yelled, "You're bluffing!" "Am I?" she replied, her voice dangerously calm. "Ask your employers what luminari are taught about biology. We get creative when we're cornered." While they hesitated, I shoved our bed against the door. It wasn't much, but it would buy us seconds. "2 minutes!" the man shouted. "Then we're coming in hard!" "The back window," I whispered, pointing to the emergency exit. "It leads to the vehicle bay." We grabbed our essentials. The moment I broke the window's seal, toxic air rushed in. I shoved my emergency respirator over Lyra's face. "What about you?" she cried. "Mining family," I choked out, the air already searing my lungs. "I've got tough lungs." We dropped to the ground just as our door splintered inward. Shouts echoed behind us as we sprinted through the blinding, toxic storm. Every breath felt like swallowing fire, but Lyra's brilliant glow cut through the dust, a beautiful, damning beacon guiding us forward. We scrambled into the vehicle bay. As I hotwired a small scout rover, I plugged my datapad into the main terminal. While the system rebooted, I initiated a massive data download, everything I could find on this illegal operation. The bay doors exploded inward behind us as I floored it, smashing out into the raging storm. We had the evidence. Now, we just had to survive long enough to use it, and finally find our freedom. What would you do if the person you loved was dying right in front of you, and an army was kicking down your door to capture you? This is the choice Lyra had to make, and it's a story you won't forget. So stick around for the next 60 seconds to see how it ends. Behind them, other rovers roared through the dust, hot on their trail. "Where are we even going?" Lyra yelled, frantically checking their supplies. "Survey Station 12, Marcus choked out. "It's automated, but it has a comms array. We can call for help." "From who?" she shot back. "We're fugitives, remember?" "I've got a plan," Marcus coughed, the coppery taste of blood filling his mouth. The brief exposure to the toxic air had done more damage than he'd let on. "But first, we need to lose these guys." He drove like a man possessed, swerving through the storm, using every dirty trick he'd learned from the old miners. The rovers behind them fell back, but they didn't give up. They were hurting them, not just chasing. "Marcus," Lyra said, her voice tight with panic. "You're bleeding." He wiped his mouth, and his glove came away red. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. It's not. It's those organisms. They're in your lungs." Her medical scanner confirmed her worst fear. "You need treatment right now." "After we get to safety," he gasped. "You won't make it to safety." Her voice cracked. "Please, let me drive. You need to focus on just breathing." They swapped seats without even stopping, Lyra taking the controls with a skill that surprised him. Marcus leaned back, forcing himself to take tiny, shallow breaths, each one a fresh wave of agony. Finally, Survey Station 12 emerged from the swirling dust like a steel oasis. Lyra gunned it, crashing right through the main doors and sealing them shut just as their pursuers appeared over the ridge. "Comms array," Marcus wheezed, pointing a shaky finger. While Lyra frantically worked to get a signal, Marcus used his last bit of strength to fortify their position. The station was well stocked, designed to keep a survey team alive for months, but it wouldn't last long against a determined assault. "Who are we calling?" Lyra asked as the array hummed to life. "Captain Reeves," Marcus said. "If anyone can get us out of this, it's him." He suddenly doubled over, a violent cough racking his body, spattering more blood on the floor. Lyra was at his side in a second, her hands glowing with a soft light as she pressed them to his chest. "Hold on. Just hold on." The communication array crackled. Then a miracle. "This better be important," a gruff voice grumbled. "Do you have any idea what time it is in my part of the galaxy?" "Captain," Lyra said, desperation in her voice. "We need help. Marcus is dying." There was a pause. "Where are you?" "Mining Colony X-47. "I know it. Nasty place. Sit tight. Help's on the way." "How can you possibly? Did you really think I'd let you two idiots wander off without keeping tabs on you? My ship's been shadowing you for weeks." Reeves's voice turned to steel. "Keep him alive, Princess. I'm 20 minutes out." The connection died. Outside, their pursuers had surrounded the station. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Surrender now, and we'll provide medical treatment for your companion." "They're lying," Marcus gasped. "They need you alive. They don't care about me." "Then they're idiots," Lyra said fiercely, "because I am not going to let you die." Her hands glowed brighter, and Marcus felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. The pain eased, just a little, but he could still feel the organisms moving inside him, still destroying him from within. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Sharing my energy. It's a luminary technique. It won't cure you, but it'll buy us some time." She leaned in close, her forehead touching his. "Stay with me." "Always," he managed to say. The entire station shook as something heavy slammed into the outer walls. Their pursuers were done waiting. Marcus struggled to sit up, reaching for his plasma cutter. "No," Lyra said firmly. "Save your strength. They'll take you. Let them try." She stood up, and her entire body began to blaze with light. The specimen container she was holding glowed with a dangerous energy. I wasn't kidding about the bioweapon training. The main door began to glow cherry red. They were cutting their way in. Through his blurry vision, Marcus watched Lyra take her stance. She looked like a warrior princess, ready for her last stand. Then new sounds echoed from outside. Explosions, screams, and the distinct whine of military-grade weapons. The cutting on the door stopped. "What's happening?" Lyra ran to a monitor showing the external security feeds. Through the storm, new figures moved with deadly precision. These weren't their pursuers. These newcomers were slicing through the bounty hunters like they were made of paper. In just a few minutes, it was all over. A new voice came through the station speakers. "Princess Lyra Nessa, this is Commander Vex of the Luminary Royal Guard. We are here to bring you home." Lyra's skin flared white-hot with pure rage. "Royal Guard? You have no authority here." "Your mother disagrees," Commander Vex replied coolly. "The situation has changed, Princess. Prince Axiom's deceptions have been exposed. You are no longer a fugitive. You are a witness." Marcus struggled to see clearly. "Don't trust them," he wheezed. "I know," Lyra said softly, her hand finding his. Then her voice boomed with authority. "If you want to talk, Commander, you'll come in alone and unarmed." "That seems unwise," Vex replied. "Those are my terms. My companion needs immediate medical attention. Every second we waste negotiating is a second he gets closer to death." There was a long silence. Then the station's emergency airlock hissed open. A single tall figure entered, clad in the ceremonial armor of the Royal Guard, her blue skin covered in ritual scars. Commander Vex removed her helmet, revealing a face that was harsh but not cruel. "Princess," she said with a formal nod. Then her eyes landed on Marcus. "He's dying." "Tell me something I don't know," Lyra snapped. "Can you help him or not?" Vex approached them slowly, pulling out a medical kit. "Toxic organism infection, advanced stage. He needs a full cellular cleanse. And even then," she shook her head. "We have the technology on my ship, but then what are we waiting for?" "Princess?" Vex's voice was carefully neutral. "My orders are to bring you home, alone. The human is not my concern." The air in the station seemed to crackle with energy as Lyra's glow intensified. "Then you can explain to my mother why you found her daughter's corpse lying next to her chosen mate. Because I am not leaving without him." "Chosen? Mate?" Vex's eyes went wide with shock. "You've undergone the bonding?" "See for yourself." Vex pulled out a bioscanner and swept it over them. Whatever she saw on the screen made her take a step back in disbelief. "By the ancient stars, a full synchronization with a human. The Council can burn," Lyra said flatly. "Save him or you lose us both." Marcus could feel Lyra's energy pouring into him, a sheer force of will keeping him alive, but he could also feel what it was costing her. She was burning her own life away. "Lyra," he whispered. "Don't. Not for me." "Shut up," she said, her voice fierce. "You don't get to die on me. Not after everything." Vex watched them with a look of pure awe. The old stories were true. Humans really did inspire the most irrational devotion. She raised her comm unit. "Medical team to the station now. Bring a full trauma kit and prepare the cellular cleanse chamber. We have a critical patient." "Commander," a confused voice came back. Our orders have been modified," Vex cut in firmly. "By my authority as the ranking field officer. Now move." The next few minutes were a blur. Luminary medics swarmed the station, carefully placing Marcus in a stasis field that finally eased the agony in his chest. Lyra refused to let go of his hand until they physically had to separate them to move him onto the ship. "I'm coming with him," she stated, leaving no room for argument. "Princess," Vex said carefully, Once you board that ship, you are returning to Luminary space, to politics, to consequences. Are you certain? I'm certain I won't let him die alone. The Luminary ship was the exact opposite of the gritty mining colony. It was sleek, clean, and humming with advanced technology. Marcus was whisked away to the medical bay, leaving Lyra to pace the hallway outside like a caged tiger. The treatment will take hours, Vex told her gently. Perhaps you should rest. I'll rest when he's safe. As you wish. Vex paused. May I ask, how did this happen? The last report we had, you were at the academy. Then you vanished and Prince Axiom began spreading his lies. Lyra let out a bitter laugh. How did it happen? He was kind to me. Can you believe that? Just simple kindness. No agenda, no expectations. He hid me from enforcers. He gave up his entire future. He followed me into exile. All because he thought it was the right thing to do. And you bonded with him. For kindness? I bonded with him because when I was at my lowest point, when I had nothing left inside me but fear and anger, he made me laugh. He gave me hope. Lyra's glow softened. He saw me. Not the princess, not a political prize, just me. The council will never accept it, Vex warned. A human consort. Then the council can join the ashes of every other institution that tried to control me. Lyra's voice was like steel. I am done being their pawn. Hours crawled by. Lyra refused food, water, or even a chair. She just stood watch outside the medical bay, her light pulsing with her anxiety. Finally, a medic came out. He'll live, he announced, and Lyra felt her knees almost give out with relief. The organisms have been neutralized, and we've repaired the damage to his lungs. He's sleeping now, but you can see him. Marcus looked so small in the medical bed, surrounded by alien tech, but his breathing was deep and even, and the color had returned to his face. Lyra gently took his hand, feeling their bond hum with renewed life. You magnificent fool, she whispered. Don't you ever scare me like that again. His eyes fluttered open, slowly focusing on her. Lyra? Are we safe? For now, she said, squeezing his hand. But Marcus, we're on a Luminary warship. They're taking us home. To my home. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The politics? Your family? Yes. Are you ready for that? No, she admitted with a small smile. But I'm done running. It's time to face it. All of it. Together, he said. Always together. Commander Vex entered the room quietly. I apologize for interrupting, but we'll reach the jump point soon. Once we enter Luminary space, things will happen very fast. You should both prepare. Commander. Lyra's voice was steady, her eyes locked on Marcus. Give it to me straight. You said they found out Prince Axiom was lying. Vex sighed, and a holographic screen flickered to life beside her. It's a 5-alarm mess, she admitted. When you vanished, Axiom sold a story about you trying to assassinate him to escape the wedding. But he was too clever for his own good. The evidence he cooked up was perfect, so perfect it screamed fake. That got the other houses digging. The display swirled with encrypted news feeds and classified testimonies. They uncovered his real endgame, marry you, steal your family's entire fortune, and then quietly erase your bloodline forever. You running away threw a wrench in his plans, so he settled for destroying your reputation instead. Sounds about right, Lyra muttered. What about my mother? Oh, she's been on a warpath, Vex said. Leading the charge. Demanding justice. But the council is split right down the middle. Half are with her. The other half are still loyal to the prince. It's explosive. So civil war? Marcus asked, his voice regaining its edge. Not yet, but we're one wrong move away. Vex's gaze fell on their joined hands, where a faint rhythmic light pulsed between them. Your return could either fix everything or burn it all down. especially with that. What would you risk for the one you love? For Lyra, the answer was simple. Let them come, she said, her voice like sharpened steel. I'm done hiding. As their ship jumped into luminary space, Marcus felt it instantly. The stars out the viewport looked different, older, wiser, like they'd seen 1,000 civilizations turn to dust. Lyra stood at the viewport, a statue of pure tension. Tell me about your home, Marcus said, coming up softly behind her. Luminos Prime, she whispered. It has 3 moons, oceans of liquid silver, and cities that sing with the sunrise. It's the most beautiful and treacherous place you'll ever see. She leaned back against him, a rare moment of vulnerability. I never thought I'd be back. Any regrets? He asked. No, just nerves. She turned, her eyes searching his. Marcus, listen to me. The second we land, they will try to pull us apart. They'll call it protocol or security or some other official lie. Don't you let them. I won't, he promised. I'm serious. This court is a viper's nest of plots and backstabbing. You can't trust anyone but me. I survived the darkest mining colonies in the system, Marcus reminded her gently. I think I can handle a few fancy nobles. She offered a sad smile. I really hope so. The final approach to Luminos Prime was breathtaking. The planet was a swirl of iridescent light, its very atmosphere glowing. Sprawling cities were connected by rivers of light, looking more like living organisms than buildings. Thousands of ships moved in a silent, intricate ballet. But Marcus couldn't help but notice the dozen heavy warships that broke formation to escort them in. That's a lot of firepower for a welcome home party, he noted. My mother is not known for subtlety, Lyra replied dryly. They docked at an orbital station that seemed to be sculpted from pure light, more a cathedral than a spaceport. Guards in gleaming, ceremonial armor formed a silent corridor for them. Marcus felt 100 pairs of alien eyes on him, suddenly aware he was the only human for light years. Lyra held her head high, effortlessly becoming the princess she had fought so hard to escape. A formal delegation stood waiting in a grand reception hall. In the center was a woman with Lyra's sharp features and regal posture, but where Lyra's inner light was warm like a sun, this woman's was the cold, distant glitter of a dying star. Daughter, the matriarch said, her voice void of warmth. Mother, Lyra returned, just as formally. For a heart-stopping moment, they just stared at each other. Then the matriarch's gaze shifted to Marcus, and he felt the crushing weight of 1,000 years of absolute power. And this, she said with a faint sneer, is the human that broke you? This is Marcus Kane, Lyra stated, her voice ringing with defiance. My chosen mate, my bonded. You will show him the respect that title commands. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. The matriarch's face remained a perfect mask, but her aura flickered with rage. We will discuss this in private, she decreed. Guards, take them to the secured wing. Together, Lyra demanded. But of course, her mother's smile was as sharp as a shard of glass. I wouldn't dare separate a bonded pair. The consequences can be so messy. They were led down hallways that seemed to be carved from solid light. Marcus fought the urge to stare like a tourist, but the casual display of impossible technology was mind-blowing. The quarters they were brought to were more like a palace, easily larger than the entire home they'd shared back in the colony. The secured wing, Lyra said with a bitter laugh once the door sealed behind them. A gilded cage is still a cage. It's a nice cage, though, Marcus offered, tapping the shimmering energy field covering the windows. And a strong one. They won't keep us here long, she said, pacing. Too many legal headaches. But it gives my mother time to work on us. Lyra activated a privacy screen that filled the room with a soft hum. We need a game plan. I'm all ears. Tomorrow they'll hold a formal hearing. The council will want to see our bond, question us, threaten us, bribe us. It's how they operate. She took both of his hands in hers. No matter what they say or do not let them get a rise out of you. They will try to poke and prod to make you angry. If you snap, they'll use it as proof that humans are too volatile for bonding. And if they try to hurt you? He asked, his voice low. Then we fight, she said. But we fight smart. She pulled him closer. Marcus, you need to understand. What we have, it's never happened before. There are maybe 3 cases of cross-species bonding in our entire recorded history, and never with a species so different from our own. To them, we are either a miracle or a plague. Which one do you think we are? He asked. Both, she whispered, kissing him. And neither. We're just us. That's all that matters. That night was a blur of desperate passion, a final stolen moment of peace before the storm. Marcus traced the glowing patterns on her skin, amazed at how seeing her true, luminous self had become as natural as breathing. They fell asleep tangled together, a silent promise that not even unconsciousness could pull them apart. Morning arrived like a death sentence. Guards delivered formal attire, a stunning, ethereal robe for Lyra and a tailored dark tunic for Marcus that made him look respectable, but distinctly foreign. Ready? She asked, her voice tight. Not even a little bit, Marcus admitted with a grin. Let's go do this. The council chamber was an overwhelming cathedral of light. Tiers of seats rose into the heavens, filled with glowing beings whose collective light felt like 1,000 judging stars. In the very center sat a lone, raised platform. The accused will approach the platform, a disembodied voice boomed. Accused? Marcus whispered. Lyra gave him a grim smile. Did I forget to mention? We're on trial. They stepped onto the platform as the charges were read out. Dereliction of sacred duty, rejection of a lawful pairing, corruption of a noble bloodline, conspiracy against the state. The list went on and on. How do you answer these charges? The voice demanded. Lyra stood tall, her own light flaring brightly. I answer that love is not a state crime, she declared. I answer that choosing your own life is not dereliction. It is the highest duty one has. The only corruption in this room is a system that would trade its children for power. A wave of murmurs washed over the chamber. Her mother rose, her presence silencing the crowd. Such pretty words, the matriarch said, her voice dripping with ice. But they don't change the facts. You were born with a responsibility, Lyra. You threw it all away for... what? A fleeting fantasy with an alien? I threw away nothing, Lyra retorted. I chose something real over your empty political games. In a few months, Marcus has shown me more honor than this entire court has in my lifetime. Let the human speak for himself, another council member interrupted. Tell us, Marcus Kane, the councilman sneered. What kind of dark magic did you use to ensnare our princess? Marcus felt the weight of 1,000,000 years of history pressing down on him, but then he met Lyra's gaze, saw the unwavering trust in her eyes, and found his strength. No magic, he said, his voice clear and strong. Just love. I know you can't weigh that in your political equations or trade it for territory, but it's real. It's more real than any of your alliances or power grabs. Love? The matriarch's laugh was like shattering crystal. You speak of love with a being you have known for a handful of months? A creature whose biology is an affront to our own? Whose world you can never truly understand? Yeah, Marcus said without hesitation. Because love isn't about biology or time. It's about choosing someone over and over again. No matter the cost. Even if that cost is your life? The threat in her voice was unmistakable. Mother! Lyra stepped forward, her light flaring like a supernova. You will not... Enough! A new voice cut through the tension, ancient and powerful, seeming to echo from the very walls of the chamber. From the highest tier, a figure slowly descended. An elder whose light had mellowed to a deep, calming indigo. I will examine this bond myself. Elder Kronos, the matriarch said, bowing her head in deep respect. Your presence honors this council. Kronos circled them, their old eyes filled with a profound wisdom. Show me, the elder commanded. Lyra took Marcus's hand, and they let the barrier between them drop. Light poured between them, a river of gold and silver, weaving patterns that made the entire council gasp in awe. But where their light met and mingled, new colors ignited. Impossible shades that no one had ever seen before. Remarkable, Kronos murmured, circling the light without touching it. Complete and total synchronization. But there is something else here, something new. What do you mean? Lyra asked, her voice trembling slightly. Your connection, Kronos explained, turning to face the stunned chamber, is not merely emotional, it is evolutionary. The two of you have created a bridge. You have become something more. The elder's gaze swept across the silent nobles. This is not corruption. This is the next step. The next step? The matriarch's voice was laced with disbelief. They have broken every sacred tradition. Traditions must bend, Kronos countered, or they will shatter. We've become stagnant, clinging to our old traditions as the rest of the galaxy evolves, the elder declared, turning his gaze directly to Marcus. Maybe it takes a human perspective to show us that true love is worth more than all our political games. Would you stay with her, knowing you'll grow old while she remains young? Knowing our world may never truly see you as one of us, and that your children, if they're even possible, will face hardships we can't even fathom? I would, Marcus said, without a single shred of doubt. I will. And you, Lyra? Kronos asked. Would you tie your light to his fleeting mortality? Choose the brevity of a human lifespan over the long centuries with a more suitable match? 100 years with him is worth more than 1,000 years with someone I don't love, Lyra shot back. Kronos gave a slow, deliberate nod. Then I invoke the right of recognition. This bond is real. It's unprecedented, and it is protected by our most ancient laws. Anyone who stands against it stands against me. A heavy silence blanketed the chamber. Even the matriarch looked completely floored. The trial is over, Kronos announced. The princess and her chosen are free to leave. But as Lyra and Marcus turned to go, he held up a hand. I hope, however, they will choose to stay. We have a great deal to learn from this union. Stay? Lyra's voice was laced with disbelief. Here? And why not? Your mother's political crusade against Prince Axiom could use some credible witnesses. Your insight into interspecies relations could completely overhaul our diplomatic corps. And you, Kronos smiled faintly at Marcus, your engineering skills would be invaluable to our research divisions. Marcus and Lyra locked eyes, having an entire conversation in that single look. We'll think about it, Lyra said at last. But no matter where we are, we're there together. As it should be, Kronos agreed. A love that can cross the species barrier might just be the thing that helps us overcome our own limitations as a people. You've given us a gift, whether you realize it or not. As they exited the chamber, the matriarch cut them off. For the first time, the icy mask she always wore began to crack. Lyra, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I thought I had lost you for good when you vanished. You tried to sell me off to the highest bidder, Lyra stated, the anger in her words long since faded. I was trying to protect our family, our entire way of life. But then, the matriarch looked at Marcus, truly looked at him. But maybe there are different ways to be strong. Your human stood in front of the whole council and declared his love without so much as a flinch. Even Axiom, with all his power, never showed that kind of courage. His name is Marcus, Lyra corrected her gently. And he's not my human. He's my partner." "Marcus," the matriarch said, testing the name on her tongue. Would the two of you consider having dinner with me tonight? In private. I want to get to know the man who inspired my daughter to start a revolution." Marcus felt Lyra go rigid beside him, but he gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "We would be honored." The matriarch's inner light seemed to pulse with what looked like surprise. "Until tonight, then." As she walked away, Lyra turned to Marcus, her eyes wide with astonishment. I have never seen her back down like that." "People can change," Marcus said. "Sometimes they just need a little push." "Or a human who flat out refuses to be scared off," Lyra added. She kissed him right there in the hallway, not caring who might be watching. "So what do you think? Do we stay and try to build something new here, or do we head back to the frontier?" Marcus thought about it. The palace was stunning, but it was also foreign. The politics were a tangled, vicious mess, but Lyra's light, her very essence, seemed to shine brighter here, like she was finally, completely herself. And the thought of working with their advanced technology, of being part of something so groundbreaking. "Let's give it 6 months," he proposed. "See if we can actually make a difference. If not, the frontier will still be there." 6 months, she agreed. "But if my mother tries to arrange another marriage for me, then we steal the nearest ship and make a run for it," Marcus finished for her. "I'm getting pretty good at the whole fugitive lifestyle." She let out a laugh, a sound like wind chimes that had stolen his heart from the very beginning. "I love you, you know. My brave, stubborn, impossibly perfect human." "And I love you," he replied. "My revolutionary princess who saw me stripped down to nothing and decided I was a keeper." "Best decision I ever made," she said, pulling him down the corridor toward their rooms. "Although I think we should probably recreate that particular moment, just for the sake of history, of course." "Purely for historical accuracy," Marcus agreed with a wide grin. As they walked through the halls made of living light, he thought about the insane journey that had led them to this point. From a simple accident at a water reclamation plant to a full-blown intergalactic incident, from fugitives to officially recognized partners. It was definitely not the engineering career he had mapped out for himself, but somehow it was exactly where he was meant to be. The future stretched out in front of them, filled with uncertainty, challenges, and endless possibilities. But whatever was coming, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else, together.